Welcome to the TKN Leadership Podcast with Matthew Watley. I'm your host, Dr. Daryl Williams. Joining me today is Lisa Fields, the Executive Director of the Jude 3 Project. The Jude 3 Project is an apologetics project that helps Christians know what they believe and understand why they believe it. This is going to be a great conversation with a great leader. Everybody, help me welcome Lisa Fields. How you doing today, Lisa?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here with you.
We are excited to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about your background. Tell everybody who Lisa Fields is.
Yes, born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm a PK.
You're a PK.
So my father's a pastor, been in church all my life. Started the Jude 3 Project back in 2014, February 2014, and it's grown and developed to what it is now. We produce two documentaries. We have curriculums, media series, a HBCU tour, all the things, and so
Gotcha.
I'm so thankful for what God has done.
So Jude 3 is an apologetics organization. You want people to know what they believe and how and why they believe it.
Yes.
Tell us how you got there. That is not, I don't know anybody that on career day said, you know what, I want to be a modern Christian apologist. How did you get there?
Yeah, so it was never in my goal. I played the stock market game in fifth grade. I was in a magnet program, and my goal was to be a stockbroker and work on Wall Street. And so God had radically different plans. But I had an elective of New Testament in undergrad, and I didn't realize that New Testament wasn't going to be like Sunday school.
Oh.
So I thought, New Testament, Sunday school, my parents taught me the Bible, it'll be an easy A.
Sure.
Well, first day of class, my professor said, I'm going to change everything you thought you knew about Jesus. And that was my first indicator that this wasn't going to be like Sunday school. And I really struggled through that class. I went through a faith crisis because, taking New Testament at just a regular university is so different.
Where'd you go to undergrad?
University of North Florida.
Okay.
And just radically wrecked my life. My dad introduced me to apologetics, was really helpful, and then just fell in love with the discipline. But I didn't see anyone that looked like me leading in that space. Right. Outside of Ravi Zacharias, there was no person of color in that space. And so I wanted to create an organization that filled the gap. Now,
give folk what a good definition of apologetics is.
Yes. Apologetics comes from the Greek word apologia that we see in 1 Peter 3:15 when Peter says we ought to be able to give a defense for the hope that we have. And really, I just say it is really giving a reason for why we believe in Jesus with gentleness and respect. That's really the whole discipline of apologetics. It's more of people think about it as an intellectual endeavor, to be able to intellectually engage with people who have different beliefs and respond with intellectually engaging answers. But I think apologetics is a holistic approach.
Okay, say more about that.
Ergen Cantor, in his book Popular Encyclopedia for Apologetics, said apologetics is informational and incarnational.
Okay.
It is not only just giving information about why we believe what we believe, but it is embodying the information we believe.
Embodying the information we believe, living out our faith. Yes. Okay.
And that is the best defense for our faith. If you live it, that is the best defense for it. You can tell people what you believe, but when you show people what you believe, it has way more power. So
you spent some time, you stockbroker, you worked in banking, and then you went to seminary at Liberty University.
Yes.
How was that? And how was that different than what you discovered at North Florida when you took that first New Testament class?
Yes. So I would say New Testament at UNF was a more progressive understanding of Scripture.
Sure.
Our textbook was Bart Ehrman, a professor of New Testament at UNC Chapel Hill. And so Bart Ehrman was, at the time, agnostic. I think he might be atheist now. So
oh, wow.
Understanding New Testament from someone who no longer
doesn't believe
is a very different thing than going to a super conservative school. And that was a very different experience, but it still had a level of rigor to it. I still went through, I think, a second faith crisis when I was in seminary that was different than the first.
Sure.
Right. And so it still had a level of rigor where you're interrogating, you're putting your beliefs under a microscope and saying, do I really believe this? And so that was a very interesting experience, but also it was an experience in immersion in white evangelicalism,
sure,
which is a very different experience than I'm Black Pentecostal growing
sure.
up.
So those are worlds apart.
Yes. And so I just love the fact that God has taken me to these various places and now that I look with all we do, like with Courageous Conversations, it helps me to understand different perspectives because I've been in different worlds.
So you finished seminary,
Yes.
and you launched the Jude 3 project.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about, well, number one, what made you want to launch something? This is entrepreneurship, really. You know, we don't think about entrepreneurship in the faith-based space, but anytime we launch something from nothing, you're an entrepreneur, but you're a faith entrepreneur. Tell me how you made the leap. I'm leaving seminary. I got my MDiv. I'm not going to pastor. I'm not going to be a youth minister. I'm going to launch an organization.
Yeah, so I was really, really shaped by different ministries, one in particular, RZIM, and their story really resonated with me.
Sure.
And so I was like, I want to do that.
Okay.
I just felt immediately that that's what I wanted to do. I felt called to do, because working for one would still, you still are not focusing on African American audience. They may put you and like you do some stuff in to Black audiences, but the whole focus of the organization is still going to be very Eurocentric.
They may send you to a Black church to take what they're giving.
Yeah.
It's different when you...
Yeah, but I felt like our people needed something that was wholly devoted to them, that would care about our needs and our questions. And so that motivated me. But it wasn't my first jump into entrepreneurship.
Okay.
So in undergrad, I owned a Christian t-shirt company.
Really?
And so I had done an entrepreneurial kind of thing before. So I think it was just in my bones.
Just in your DNA.
Yeah.
See, leaders see a vacuum, and they don't look for somebody else to do it. They step into it.
Yeah.
So you stepped into this vacuum doing apologetics from an African American standpoint.
Yes.
Now, that's the why. But let me ask you the first real leadership question. How did you start it? Because a lot of folk have an idea. How do you get the idea to move towards reality?
Yeah, great question. So for me, the only hiccup, when I started Jude 3, I didn't see it becoming what it is now.
Okay. What did you see it becoming?
I didn't know. I was stepping out on faith. I didn't know what it was to be. I just felt like God is leading me to start this website, Jude3project.com at the time. And the only obstacle, because I was a broke seminary student, was who was going to design a website, who's going to pay for the website.
Sure.
So I learned how to create a website on my own.
Okay.
I learned how to design a logo on my own. And once I learned those skills, I just threw it up there.
Okay.
And put some articles up there, got some partners, and then we hired our first event. I'm a PK, so I've been working in ministry my whole life.
Sure.
I knew how to do events. So we did an event with local pastors in Jacksonville to help train them in apologetics. And we started with events, and we started with a website and social media, and then we moved to podcast. So it was very much so kind of grow as you go. This is where I feel like the Lord is leading me, and I did it.
So taking the next faithful step.
Yeah.
So as you continue to grow, you're doing more things. We're going to get into the documentaries. We're going to get into the podcast. We're going to get into these YouTube videos, because that's how I first found Jude through your Courageous Conversation videos. But you start off doing it all yourself. How did you start getting other people to join in, whether they were volunteers or staff? How did you get people to come along with the vision? Because I cannot imagine that you figured out how to design a logo and a website, and then you started, running around with cameras and microphones and everything else, and doing events. You had to start bringing other people in. Help leaders who are kind of at the beginning of their journey. How do you start getting people to join in? How do you start finding people to follow?
Great question. I think, for Jude 3, God has been really kind to us by just sending people who have been impacted by the ministry and saying, how can we help? How can we partner? Now, that doesn't mean you say everybody that asks, how can you help, that you sign them on. You have to still be, all help isn't good help, and sometimes free help is the worst help. But God sends people your way, and you see, is this a personality type that works well with me and works well with the mission and vision of the organization? And then there are some people that I've just identified throughout the process of time, through recommendations, through other friends who have done work in ministry, camera. The first cameraman we had came from my mentor, who had done work and led was a principal at a Christian school. Okay. And the guy that was his film teacher,
Mm-hmm.
he was like, you should have him do it. And so he recorded it for us. So that was you get through recommendations through who God sends are
Sure.
people who work alongside.
Well, you get recommendations, God sends people, but the thing that I enjoy about what you said is collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't afraid to talk to people that might be able to help you. And I think sometimes leaders get the, I can do it all myself. I have a son, his favorite thing is I can do it. And I think a lot of leaders do the I can do it and don't want to ask for help. As a leader, did you find it difficult or easy to sort of say, listen, I need some help with this, and I'm going to ask somebody?
Yeah, it's difficult in certain areas.
Okay.
When you think about when you're forming your board, I had a wealthy organizational leader who started an organization. It became very prominent in Jacksonville.
Okay. And
And then he got all these outside board members, and then they end up kicking him out of his own organization. And so when he counseled me early on, and he was like, don't be so quick to put these various people on your board that don't have relationships with you. They just have relationships with the brand or
Sure.
are connected to the brand. So that made me a little hesitant at first to be open to some more leadership insight outside of the people that I knew and trusted. So in one area, it was hard. But when it comes to like videos and things of that nature, I find it easier to ask for help because
Sure.
it's a little bit more distant from you.
Mhm.
But then when it's closer to you, it can be harder
Okay.
to grow and develop in that way.
So you start off, you do your first event, you're teaching apologetics to pastors. How'd you grow from there?
Yeah, so we started a podcast.
Okay.
So I had some experience in podcasting. In seminary, I launched a podcast on just for young professionals in culture.
Okay.
And so I had been doing that with a friend for a year, and so I knew how the podcast game worked.
Sure.
So I was like, let me start a podcast for Jude 3. The first episode was the intersection of theodicy and hip-hop.
Okay.
So we talked about Jay-Z's song Lost One.
Uh-huh.
And he talked about his nephew dying in the car he bought and how he wrestled like with God, like, is this my fault, and all of that stuff.
Now, real quick, define theodicy for the audience.
Yes, it's trying to solve the problem of evil. Why do good things
Why do good things happen to why do bad things happen to good people? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and if God is all loving, all powerful, all knowing, then why doesn't he stop these things?
Right.
And so just wrestling with that was my first episode. It was literally just me recording and talking for 15 minutes. And people gravitated to it. So then I started.
Okay, I want you to stop right there because I've seen the stuff you've done since.
Yeah.
Your first episode was you recording
On a
and
mic.
talking on a mic for 15 minutes.
With no video.
With no video. So you started with what you had.
Yes.
You didn't say, I got to have the right mics, I got to have the right cameras, I got to get these lights. You said, I can talk into a mic for 15 minutes. Okay. So you started with what you had. Tell us how it grew from there.
Yeah. Then I started bringing guests on, and I just reached out to people through Twitter.
Through Twitter?
Yes. Reached out to guests through Twitter, and they would say, yeah, I'll do it. Or when I was trying to find black experts, I would go to all the seminary websites.
Sure.
And look at the pictures of the faculty and identified black faculty and saw their specialty.
Gotcha.
And I would just email them because their email is on there.
Yeah.
And say, hey, do you want to come and talk about this? Just to build a network of black scholars, because there's this thing where people don't think black people are theologians or scholars. Right. They only see white faces. So
sure.
I was like, let me show the world that we exist. And so that's how we grew the podcast.
So you go from the podcast. What's next?
Podcast, then we do an HBCU tour.
HBCU tour. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, on the HBCU tour, just to make sure we're understanding, it wasn't taking kids to see HBCUs.
No.
You were taking what you do to HBCUs.
Yes.
Okay.
So we heard from a number of people that the biggest apologetic question on black college campuses was, is Christianity a white man's religion?
Wow.
So I said, you know what? Let's just hold an event called Is Christianity a White Man's Religion for students.
Okay.
And that's what we began to do. We started at Bethune-Cookman. We went to Clark Atlanta. We went to Southern. We've been to a number of different schools across the country to just have these forums on campus where we do Q&A.
Sure.
talkbacks, and students really resonated with it because it's like, this is the question we've been asking, and we haven't seen the church come to us in this way to really wrestle with this question.
Now, I went to an HBCU. I don't know any HBCU where freshman year you don't run into that guy or that girl or, that organization that's somewhere on the yard talking about it's the white man's religion, come on out of there. So you went to the people. Let me ask you the leadership question. There's somebody listening right now that wants to know this. You started off by yourself. You did a podcast. You grew that podcast. Now you're on tour. How are you paying for this?
Great question. I've wondered that myself. Really just generous donations from people who've bought into the message.
Okay.
That was before we had foundations giving to us.
Sure.
But it was just churches,
okay,
Black churches, who understood the need for people, young people particularly, navigating wrestling. And so they're giving to the cause.
So you asked people who had an interest to support your work.
Yes.
I think oftentimes as leaders, we don't realize that there are people who want to support what we're doing, and we just have to ask them, but also make a case for what we're delivering, because sometimes we'll ask somebody to support something, but we can't explain what they're supporting.
Yes.
So you were able to say, listen, this is the mission, this is the expected impact, can you help us?
Yes. And I do think some of that, to my parents' credit, my parents have a very good reputation in Jacksonville.
Sure.
And so when I'm asking pastors, I'm also leaning on the favor of my parents. And so it's not all me, but I'm standing on shoulders of people who have built rapport with people. And because of their rapport, I get some of that favor.
But to keep it, you have to deliver.
Yes.
To keep it, you have to deliver.
Yes.
So you move into the HBCU tours.
Yes.
Where do we go from here?
Then we start Courageous Conversations.
Courageous Conversations. Tell everybody about Courageous Conversations.
So Courageous Conversation really started off as a Google Hangout between pastors, one-on-one, and I would moderate.
Okay.
Our first one was with a pastor out of Orlando, Cam Triggs, and then Willie Francois.
Oh, yeah.
On Black liberation theology.
Okay.
And so the idea really came from, when I was in seminary, I was a part of the Academy of Young Preachers. Okay. And they would bring all the seminarians, divinity students together for an annual gathering, and we would preach a message in front of our peers, and the preaching professors would be there to critique us.
Sure.
And then we would be split up into preaching circles where we would go over our sermons and tackle a text together from different perspectives. Sure. Right? That was really transformative for me because I grew up Black Pentecostal, was at Liberty, but then I'm having conversations with people that went to Yale Divinity and, Wake Forest and all these places. Sure. And they're seeing the text from different spaces. Sure. They're Episcopalian, Catholic, all of that. It was just really a transformative experience to see, like, you're missing something when you're only looking from your vantage point. Okay. And so I was like, I want to bring that to the Black church because we think sometimes that the way we see the text is the only way to see the text. We think that everybody sees what we see. And what we see is colored by our theological training, our experiences, our denominational background. And so people also think the Black church is a monolith. Sure. And so this was a way to show, hey, there's so much diversity of thought in the Black church. There's disagreements on a number of different things, and I want to show that. But I also want to build community and relationships across people who think differently. Cool. So tell us about the documentaries. How did you make that leap? Yeah, so the documentaries was definitely providential. So I didn't set out to do it. 5 years ago, a filmmaker, Chris Lamarck, reached out to me. He said, I'm a real big fan of Jude 3. I want to do a documentary based on your work, early African Christianity. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I can't afford that. He was like, I'll do it for free. I was like, I still can't afford that because you're an expense, but there's so many other expenses. You got to fly people. You got to go to them. There's so much money involved in documentary outside of you just filming. So he was like, okay. So I kind of put him on the back burner. A year later, another apologist reached out to me and said, hey, there's an NFL player who feels burdened to make a documentary on early African Christianity. Him and his wife have put some money aside, but he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know a filmmaker, and he doesn't know any of the scholars.
Okay.
So I told him to talk to you. So he had just got traded from Detroit back to the Jaguars because he started his career with the Jaguars.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, we can meet. I met with him and his wife.
He's in Jacksonville. You're in Jacksonville.
And so we just talked, and he was like, yeah, this is what we've set some money aside for this. I was like, okay, cool. A filmmaker actually approached me about that a year ago. Why don't we try to see if there's some synergy here? And we all got together, and that's how the documentary came about.
Now, I just want everybody to see this. You, because of your work, became a nexus connecting these disparate parts to create something else.
Yes.
Tell us, as a leader, what do leaders need to be aware of to make sure they're connecting things that move a mission forward?
Yeah, I think just being sensitive to the Holy Spirit and the people's strengths that you're coming in contact with,
sure.
Right? I feel like in many spaces, God has given me the ability to connect people. My friend said if I wasn't an apologist, I could be a business consultant because I'm always helping them put the pieces of the puzzle together. But I think that's a good connector is good at listening and kind of filing in their folder of their mind people's strengths and weaknesses and looking for ways for those strengths and weaknesses to collaborate with others. So
you've added all these pieces.
Yeah.
You started with a podcast. You got documentaries. You got tours, and you've now got this. You've got this Jude 3 conference that you do every year. As you've grown this organization and done this incredible work, what has been the leadership lesson that you? Let me put it a different way. What leadership lesson do you wish you had known about growth before you started growing?
That it takes longer than you think it will.
Takes longer than you think it will. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think you get excited about a mission and vision, and you have these grand ideas.
Sure.
And it always takes longer than you want it to.
Gotcha.
But if you want to build deep and not just wide, you want it to take longer than you think it should.
Say that again. You want it to take longer than you think it should. Because leaders want to get from here to there, and we want to get there quickly.
Yes.
But you're saying for it to last,
yes,
it's got to take longer.
Yes.
That's just a good word, because all of us have seen what we think is overnight success, and all of us want that. But you're saying your success has come over time. Jude 3 has been in existence how long
Next
now?
year it'll be 10 years.
Be 10 years to be an overnight success. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Tell us about the conference.
Yeah, our conference is a yearly conference. It started in 2018 we were doing the Google Hangouts, the Courageous Conversation Google Hangouts, and I wanted to do one that was going to be not Google Hangout in person. And my friend Charlie Date said, hey, you should think about making this a bigger event.
Sure.
He was like, I hosted at Progressive for free. I was like, oh, okay. At first, when he said it, I thought he was going to fund the whole thing, but that was a misconception and misunderstanding. If I didn't think that, I probably would have never did it. That's so funny that God used my misunderstanding to launch me into something that would revolutionize our organization.
Sure.
But so we gathered 20, that time it was 24 of the leading black scholars from both sides, progressive and conservatives, for conversations around, should we trust the Bible? The authority of Scripture, sexuality, justice, exclusivity of Jesus, Paul versus Jesus, and it was the first of its kind, historic event, and it continues to grow every year. We did it every year since then, except COVID year 2020.
Okay, so how many has that been?
This last one was our fifth one.
So your fifth one.
Yes.
Now I want everybody to understand. In 10 years, you went from an idea, a microphone, and you, to documentaries, tours, this major conference that goes on every year except for the COVID year, and there's still more to come. Tell us what's next for Jude 3.
Yeah, more documentaries. We're continuing to expand because we are a multimedia company, right? And so continuing to expand. our reach with curating conversations and engagement for the next generation. I like to say we're helping people reimagine faith through apologetics.
Helping people reimagine faith through apologetics.
Yes.
So let me ask you a leadership question. As you're continuing to expand, you're clearly bringing in more staff. You're not doing this by yourself. There's no way you can. So what was the challenge going from a solopreneur to having to actually manage people, and to manage people that your folk are distance, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
How's it been creating team and culture from people that are not in a building and really have never been in a building? Like, that's not how you do stuff.
Yeah, we had we have a headquarters.
Right.
We have offices. We had an office in Florida, and we have an office in D.C.
Okay.
But we've never had all of our staff in one place together.
Right.
Yeah.
So how is leading that?
Leading it's a joy.
Okay.
I would say, because it requires another gear.
Uh-huh.
It requires you to invest in people.
Okay.
And
talk to us about investing in people.
Yes. So investing in people, one of the things that God has really grown me is how to invest in the people that are invested in Jude 3.
Yes.
Because if I invest in them, it makes them more committed to the mission and vision, right?
Right.
So that means that I have to know what's going on in your life. And I mean, to a degree, the more staff you get, the less you can do this effectively, but you want to create a culture where you know, especially when your team is small, what they're dealing with interpersonally, because what they're dealing with interpersonally is going to manifest in how they do their work.
Right.
But when you're invested and you're listening and you know what's going on, you know their traumas and you know how to pray for them, then that creates them, you investing them makes them want to invest in you. And you keep them for the long haul because they see that you actually care about them. And they could actually make more money in other places, but because you care about them, they will be willing to take less sometimes because they know that you invested in them.
I am so glad you shared that, because all of us have worked in environments where we didn't feel like people. We felt like units of production, and had people treat us like we weren't people. We were units of production. But good leaders invest in their people so that people are still people.
Yes.
And that is awesome. That is awesome. Hey, everybody, listen, I told you, we bring the brightest minds to give us what we need so that we can lead. So if you're trying to start something, you now know you can start with an idea and move it into something amazing. Lisa, we always do 3 questions before we leave to get to know you a little bit better. So what's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
It's a Haagen-Dazs. They have a pineapple coconut flavor that I enjoy.
Oh, see, you're not even doing flavors. You're doing brands. It's the Haagen-Dazs pineapple coconut.
Yes.
I'm with you. I'm a Haagen-Dazs fan myself. Myself. Where's your favorite place to go on vacation? Because leaders need rest.
I just went to Grenada, and it was
really
nice. Yeah.
Okay.
I want to go to Turks and Caicos. I feel like that's going to be my favorite when I go, but Grenada is now my new favorite.
Grenada's your new favorite, but you got great expectations for Turks and Caicos.
Yeah, I do.
Last but not least, before we get out of here, one leadership lesson you want our audience to take with them. If they heard nothing else today, what do you want them to walk away with?
Love people well.
Love people well. Friends, that has been Lisa Fields, the executive director and founder of the Jude 3 Project. She wants you to know you can start at the bottom and get all the way to the top as long as you love people well. Thank you for joining us again for the TKN Leadership Podcast with Matthew Watley. Listen, you know what we're here for. We are here to get you from where you are to where you should be. We're helping leaders get to their next level. So like, subscribe, follow. We'll have information in the show notes how you can check out Jude 3 and what they're doing next. But most of all, you keep leading, and we'll keep helping. God bless you. We'll see you next time.